Hello everyone, my name's Amy Dobson. I am a health visitor by clinical background. I'm also a children's nurse. I've got an undergraduate degree in psychology and I've just finished my PhD, and that's the topic I'm going to talk to you about today. So the PhD title is Supporting Families with Unsettled Babies, Development of a Digital Intervention. And the three professors in the bottom right are my supervisors. So my plan is to share with you my research and the development of the intervention, as well as show you a little bit about what we've ended up with. At this point, it's a kind of very early stage draft prototype, so I've not got a website link that I can send you, but there is some really kind of exciting plans to finish developing this and testing it out. So if we can get that funded, then that will be brilliant. So my question for all of you today really is, do you have any thoughts after I show you the intervention of anything, obviously anything glaringly obvious you think I've missed, or any problems you might anticipate with something like this? And also, if you think this could be helpful, maybe how it might fit within your own setting, your service, if it's something that might be useful. So I'll start off and we'll see kind of what we end up with. I don't know what your roles are or anything like that. So and I know it's a small number, so forgive me. We're kind of just going as we go, and then we'll see how we get on at the end. So first off, there's just a brief trigger warning. I have learned throughout my PhD, presenting it to lots of people, that essentially it's a really emotive topic. And I've got first-hand experience that anything to do with birth and parenthood can be really triggering and difficult sometimes. So I do plan to discuss these topics. If that's something that's going to be difficult for you, then do feel free to step out at any point. Obviously, I won't even know because you've got your cameras off anyway. So not a problem. So unsettled babies then, we defined basically as parents who are worried about their baby who is crying a lot, maybe vomiting a lot. They might have funny poos, rashes, difficulty sleeping, difficulty settling. These tend to be very stressed and anxious families. And I'm sure I'm painting quite a familiar picture for many of you who see families clinically, of basically parents who are worried about their baby's behaviour. So we know that these types of symptoms can be connected to medical labels like allergy and reflux, and there's prescribing increases for both of those diagnoses and prescriptions in recent years. So you may already be aware of that. And you might also have seen the Lancet breastfeeding series, which highlighted recently that there's a really significant issue, particularly with infant formula industry funding within this area, which does create bias, and it can be problematic. So the argument that was made quite compellingly, I think, in the Lancet and in other places, is that evolutionarily normal infant behaviours like crying, wanting to be held, being sick even, which have a kind of biological basis and we know are normal behaviours, also can be indicative of medical issues, but very much that sort of frame of reference in terms of the spectrum of normal allows opportunity for commercial industries to intervene and frame these behaviours as a problem that can be fixed with obviously specialist formula. So we've got good cohort data now, and that shows us that the prevalence rates for allergy, for example, haven't increased in this time. So looking at the data, there's a chance that quite a lot of these babies are being diagnosed inaccurately, and obviously they're having medications and formulas they don't always need. Now, clearly, oh, hang on, going through, hang on. Sneak preview, if you were paying attention. So clearly that's an issue, obviously. But I think for me as a clinician, perhaps equally importantly, I worry that when I see these families myself in practice, I don't feel I'm meeting these parents' needs. And it is a very distressing experience. It is something that causes a lot of concern and it's very common. And it's something that I just feel we don't have the tools that we need to support this effectively in practice at the moment. So whilst we're starting from a premise that inaccurate diagnoses and prescriptions cause harm, clearly just taking those diagnoses and prescriptions away doesn't solve the problem either, because we're not actually meeting the parents' needs. So my PhD research has been really about trying to understand how we might be able to meet parents' needs in another way that hopefully doesn't cause harm. So this is my PhD research in a nutshell. So in the bottom left, we've got a systematic review, and that was essentially a qualitative review, so words rather than numbers, and looking at all the published parent experiences of unsettled babies, with a particular focus on medical labels and illness-related interpretations for those unsettled symptoms. We also did lots of PPIE in various forms, and that's taken a big part of my PhD. So forgive me for not knowing your backgrounds, but for anybody who isn't familiar with the term, PPIE means parent public and patient involvement, or public and parent involvement in my case, and engagement. And it's essentially where you're asking members of the public and parents to help you to design your research, run your research, co-produce interventions. So it's not just acting as a participant, but actually partnering with you in creating that research. So we've done lots and lots of that. Also looked at qualitative interview data with 25 mothers. They were all cis female mothers, parents who identified as mothers. So we do need to do more work around parents of other genders. But we've got some data from that from other sources as well, which has also been fed into the design of the intervention. And I did a really deep dive on this data, the kind of deep dive that you only get to do in a PhD, where you've got a bit more time and space to sort of explore those nuances a bit more. So I was really lucky to be able to do that. And we've got some data from that, and that's then fed into this final part, which is the intervention development. And that's the bit that I'm going to kind of step through a little bit with you today. And it's formed essentially a theory, evidence, and person-based behavioural intervention for parents who are worried about their unsettled babies. And I want to share with you kind of the concepts that we based that intervention on, give you a sense of what we've ended up with. So, as I say, we started out with all this wonderful rich data, parent experiences, PPIE, and the systematic review. All of that's been pulled together into one kind of conceptual model. I'm going to share it with you now, but I don't know how well it's going to show up on your screen. So don't worry if you can't see the detail, it doesn't really matter. But it's just basically to show you the essential ideas. And it's also available on the QR code there. So this has been published now, and it's part of the systematic review. So you can see it on that QR code. But this is the model that forms the fundamental basis, basically, for understanding the intervention that we've developed through the PhD. So you can see at the top, research has found that developing an identity as a good parent is really central to the parent experience when they're worried about their unsettled babies. So new parents being in the process of growing into parenthood against a backdrop of inaccurate societal messages, norms of perfection, and their own existing personal, cultural, or religious identity. This is sometimes alongside experiences of trauma during conception, pregnancy, and birth. They often then experience a sense of guilt and failure, which is in response to their baby's unsettled behaviour. Both physical and emotional connectedness to their baby are impacted, and bonding can be challenging, and that increases the sense of guilt. Parents feel helpless, and that causes great distress. They also often fear judgment, and they need a supportive social network around them. So the good mother in this context of identity as a good parent is seen as an advocate, a martyr. She's got the perfect body for birth and breastfeeding, and she's got a perfect knowledge of and a perfect instinct for her baby. So that being the context, there's then a kind of cycle of behaviours that really came strongly out of the literature, this sort of cycle of looking for a solution. And there's some quotes there in the middle illustrating how parents were articulating that felt to them. And around the outside, you can see some of the key themes. So firstly, we've got expectations, and that's expectations of themselves as a parent, also expectations of their baby, expectations of what is normal baby behaviour. Then we've got infant feeding. That's commonly entwined with unsettled behaviours in a huge number of complex ways. Feeling dismissed often by healthcare professionals, unfortunately, and a sense of uncertainty, confusion, really strong feelings of helplessness, and a sense of alertness and vigilance about various medical issues. So we've suggested that aside from growing out of it, which obviously lots of babies do grow out of unsettled behaviours eventually, but other than that, there could be two possible routes out of this cycle. One option is that parents get a medical label to explain their baby's symptoms, and my PhD work has really been trying to figure out how the medical label meets those needs and what role it might be functioning, so that we can offer really meaningful support to parents. And the other possible option is that parents develop a sense of a positive parenting identity in some other way. So essentially, all parents in this situation need to hear that it's not their fault. And that's one of the really key messages that my research has shown, and that I hope comes through in my intervention. So this is the method that I used to develop the intervention. I'm not going to talk about it much, but it's got the person-based approach it's called. It's got really well established track record for digital health interventions particularly, and it's based in health psychology. So the good thing about it is allows us to look at how and why something works, instead of just going in straight into a trial and working out that it does or doesn't in that very specific instance. So it also works really well with PPIE. So it is very much focused on keeping the parent in mind here, and the family at the centre. And one of the things you use as part of this is a logic model. And essentially, this is the theory of the intervention that shows you what you're starting with as a problem, and it goes through to the outcomes on the other side that you're aiming for. But importantly, instead of just this black box in the middle, it's got a series of processes that you show that this is how you're aiming to get from A to B. And that's crucial because you can then test those things. So this is my logic model. I'm going to flash it up for you, but I mean, I'm not expecting you to be able to see it in great detail because, you know, it is quite lengthy. I'm hoping it's in preparation for publication at the moment, so I'm hoping it's going to be out there soon. But yes, I like how you can articulate the steps you're planning to take so that if something goes wrong somewhere along the way, you're more likely to be able to pick that up. And also if somebody else wants to use the intervention, run with it and do their own thing, then they can hopefully see what I was aiming to do as well. So that's the point of the logic model. And you can see I've roughly divided it into three kind of key areas, and those are the key messages of the intervention itself. So the first one is that parents do need that clear and consistent information on medical conditions, and they need it to be unbiased. They also need reassurance and support to feel less guilty, and to build that positive parenting identity. And also that we might be able to help also by supporting the parent to build a plan so that in the moment, those feelings of helplessness that can be really overwhelming might be resolved. Sorry, just 1 second. Sorry. My half-term strategy of parenting, which is mini cheddars and octonauts, appears to have its flaws, but we'll forge ahead. So yeah, so building a plan, that feeling of helplessness in the moment is really, really powerful. And hopefully by helping to build a plan with parents, we might be able to alleviate some of those feelings. So ended up with, and that's what I'm going to spend the next sort of 5 minutes or so talking you through, and then we're going to move on to a more open discussion with everybody involved. There's 3 component parts, which I hope you can see sort of correspond to the 3 key points that I was mentioning. So the first part, when should I worry? That's very much about that clear and consistent advice on the medical red flags. When is something within the spectrum of normal, and when is something indicative of a medical worry that you have to get help for? The second one is make a personal plan. Now, all of those strategies are parent tips. They've all come from parents themselves, and they're all minimal invasive. They're not medical strategies. They're all just tips and tricks that might be helpful in the moment. And you can sort of save that and email it to yourself or whatever to help you in that moment when you need it. The final part is what is a good parent, and that's the bit that really focuses on trying to reframe those ideas about good parenting and what a good parent might look like, and hopefully reassure people that it's not their fault. So what we did to try this out in the initial kind of testing bit is we did think aloud interviews. So for anyone who hasn't done a think aloud interview before, it's quite a vulnerable place for a researcher to be, but the idea is to get all the critical feedback. So essentially what you do is you find we went for 25 think aloud interviews, and it's 25 parents who are quite typical, hopefully, of the parent that you would want to reach with this intervention. So we did manage to get a couple of dads, but no parents of other genders, unfortunately. And we asked them to basically use the website as they would and say their thoughts out loud. And then you get a really honest sense of how they feel about it. And it guides the future iterations of the website and the changes you need to make. So in my case, I did 3 rounds of think aloud. So I did a round, gathered a load of data, implemented the changes off of that. Then I did another round and the same again. And then I did the 3rd round. So the idea is by the 3rd round, this is what I saw, that generally the changes that were being suggested were much smaller and less significant than they are at the start. So that's how you're kind of hopefully improving it with parent input, importantly. So I'm going to share with you a few quotes from the Think Aloud interviews that hopefully capture what we're trying to achieve with each of the 3 sections. So the first quote is for the first section, the when should I worry? And this parent said, so that's a big thing for me, knowing when you should actually worry. I think my main thing is not knowing if what she's doing is normal, basically. Then the second quote is about the make a personal plan section. And this parent said, sometimes it's even just helpful thinking that you're trying to do anything to try and ease the screaming. Having a plan, it would help, even mentally thinking, well, I'm trying to do something. And then the final part in the what is a good parent section, this parent said, it's a really nice, simple way of going, yes, I'm doing enough. Things are safe. Baby feels loved. Yes, the needs are getting met in the middle of everything. It filters out all those little niggly standards we have in life and just looks at the main stuff. I think that's a really good activity. I'm definitely going to do some of these afterwards. So that's sort of just to share with you an idea of essentially what we're trying to do with the 3 parts of the intervention. There are more bits to it as well. There's a section on infant feeding, there's a section on perinatal mental health. So the kind of other things that you might expect to see as well are there. But this is the key foundation building blocks to it. I'm just going to show you a video. Now, this is one very small part of one of the 3 strands. So it's not by any stretch the whole intervention, but I'm hoping it maybe gives a flavour of the sort of tone of it and what I was aiming for. It's only 1.5 minutes long, and this is part of the You Are a Good Parent section of the website. And hopefully it's going to play for you beautifully. But if it doesn't, will somebody please wave at me?
Amy, we can't hear the sound.
Oh dear. I thought that might be the case. Okay. I was worried about that. Display settings. No, that's not it.
If you go to if you unshare and share again, you can share with sound. There's a toggle.
Oh, okay. I didn't know I was sharing without sound, but let me try that. Thank you. Oh, include sound. There it is. Thank you. Okay, let's try that again.
If you're feeling like a terrible parent right now because your baby's crying, I just want to invite you to have a think about what you think makes a good parent. What does a good parent look like? So think of someone in your life who you think is a good parent and then imagine them with a crying baby. What would you think if you saw that? Most likely you'd feel sorry for them. Maybe you'd notice how hard they're trying to help their baby, or maybe you'd think they're a great parent for comforting their baby even though they're clearly exhausted and struggling themselves. Maybe you might admire them for having the strength to reach out and get help if they're struggling. Being a good parent doesn't mean stopping your baby from showing emotions or from crying. It means supporting them through the difficult times. If you're doing this, or trying to do this, even most of the time, then you're doing an amazing job and you absolutely are a good parent.
Okay, so, oh, I thought we were going to go again then, folks. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great stuff. So there's just a couple of quotes here from parents, which were more about their overall opinions of the website. And this first one, the parents said, well, it's actually a bit different to what I expected. I didn't really know what exactly to expect, but my first instinct was it might be just sections of advice around things like colic, reflux, that kind of thing. So actually, now there's a slant more on you are a good parent. That's quite nice because I didn't expect that. It feels like it's going to be more supportive than I thought it might be now that I'm seeing the pages. Then the second parent said it feels credible, it feels honest, and it feels supportive without having an agenda. And that to me was lovely to hear because that's really what I was hoping to achieve. So, next steps. I mentioned before that we've got plans to trial it. If we can find funding to do that, then that is the plan. That's what we want to do. But I'm very, very aware that moving forwards, we might have kind of a prototype intervention, but clearly this is part of a solution. So we know that a website obviously won't work for everybody. And there are other excellent interventions that are in this space that are being tested in clinical trials right now, and they offer similar types of help in a face-to-face context. And they're also going to be crucial to form part of the solution for families. And obviously, we also already have an amazing landscape of perinatal support in this country, which, whilst it's massively overstretched and underfunded, is actually more than capable of helping new parents if we give it the credit and value that it needs. And it absolutely does help new parents every single day. So for me, as a clinician and as a researcher, I'd love to talk to as many people as possible as interested professionals who are working in this space to try and think about any ways that you could imagine this resource being improved, any ways you could imagine it being useful, maybe how it might fit into that kind of broader landscape of support. So that's what I was hoping to do with the rest of the time that we've got. If anybody does have any thoughts or ideas they'd like to share, I'd welcome any contact. So if anybody wants to contact me, either who's on the call or also, in the future, if you're watching the recording back and you want to collaborate, please drop me an email. I'd really love to hear from you. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for having me, and thank you so much for listening.